Crucible draws from a lot of different inspirations. Hero shooters, MOBAs, and battle royales. And Amazon's stab at breaking into the video game industry is trying to be all three. And as I'm going to get into, that perhaps might be two things too many, because it feels like each mode in this game is somewhat compromised to make concessions to the other ones. But even beyond basic structural issues, Crucible is trying to compete with some of the most highly polished and massive juggernauts in the entire video game industry. And it doesn't have remotely the polish nor a good enough hook to give you a reason to look past those already established titles. We've got a lot to cover. As always, I'm Alex, and this is First 5, where I ask if games are worth your time, not your money. I played a game for 5 hours, and I'm gonna tell you if those were 5 hours well spent. And today we're hunting through the jungle in Crucible. Moment to moment, Crucible plays perfectly fine, but it does feel a little B-tier. The cast of characters is unique and interesting, but not as deep or engaging in either aesthetic or gameplay compared to both Overwatch and competing MOBAs. I know that's a ridiculously high bar to hit, but those are the games Crucible is competing with. The only real unique variety you'll find here is in an honest attempt to make melee characters an important part of the game, but it's with mixed results. The gameplay itself also felt weirdly stiff at first, especially if you're talking about a melee character. Game feel is a really nebulous thing to talk about, but Crucible's is a bit iffy. Some of it's in the details, like how this guy's axe just doesn't seem to provide any feedback on impact, and some of it comes down to bigger, more nebulous things, like the fact that despite having all these different characters with unique abilities, most of them don't feel very impactful, and some of them feel incredibly awkward to use. But by the time I was done with my first 5 hours, I'd gotten used to the system's quirks and was getting a lot more comfortable, so that might just be an onboarding thing. If there is one basic thing that Crucible outright screws up, it's communication between players. In a post-Apex Legends world, having a one-size-fits-all ping as your sole form of communication feels smotheringly restrictive, especially in a game that is heavily team-focused and requires coordination from every player. I'm not saying every game needs to just do what Apex Legends did, but there still needs to be some sort of communication in a team game, and Crucible's is so bare bones as to be almost non-existent. But with the basics out of the way, let's start talking game modes. Crucible's got 3 different game modes. Wait, there's supposed to be a third mode here. Where the hell is Harvester Command? You know what? Alright, I'm just gonna roll with it. Crucible's got 2 different game modes, Heart of the Hive and Alpha Hunters. Heart of the Knot Swarm throws you into a 4v4 team-based objective match on a massive map filled with PvE monsters. Circle strafe around mobs for EXP, take these hills for more EXP, and kill the other team when they get in the way. And then every 6 minutes or so, the real objective will pop up, a massive boss hive that your team has to go kill, then pick up the heart it drops while fending off the opposing team. Pull that off 3 times, and you win. Heart of the Hive is clearly going for a MOBA vibe here. You've got creeps to kill for experience, a big objective to have a team fight over, and a bunch of MOBA/hero shootery characters to try and mix and match to make a reasonable team comp with. That sounds like a pretty reasonable setup, but there's one huge problem. There is way too much dead time. The map is perfect for Crucible's Battle Royale mode, but it's way too huge for only 8 players, half of what the other modes fit on the same map, and that means a lot of walking places while not doing anything. These matches take 20 minutes, and you can get into as few as 3 fights across that entire runtime. If you sweep the enemy team, it'll be a good 3 minutes before they show up again, and the main objective might not even spawn during that time. The closest comparison to this dynamic is, again, a full-on MOBA. But even in those games, enemies respawn and return to the battlefield entire minutes faster, and there's still a whole bunch of objectives to tackle in the meantime. Forts to push, healing to do, creeps to kill, and a home base to bring down. In a MOBA, that respawn time feels like a precious and tense moment to try and frantically leverage your advantage in numbers. Crucible tries to do something similar, but objectives are so far apart and so quickly and easily accomplished that you'll spend most of your time just walking around or waiting for the main objective to spawn. And that's just a frankly unacceptable amount of dead time spent doing nothing. And all of that is even before accounting for all the entirely pointless games that get ruined when one side or the other loses a player. Of the dozen or so matches I played, I think maybe 2 weren't entirely one-sided stomps.
Your hunters have captured.
Luckily, there's also Alpha Hunters, far and away Crucible's best mode, where the game takes a crack at the Battle Royale formula by making it more arena shootery. 8 teams of 2 pick a place to drop, then have at it. Somebody inevitably starts shooting PvE mobs, and as everyone else descends upon them, the game quickly devolves into total delicious anarchy pretty quickly. Alpha Hunters does have one really interesting twist to it, though. While most battle royales are finding ways to bring dead teammates back into the game, Alpha Hunters goes the opposite direction. You'll never get your original teammate back, but if you find another player who also lost their teammate, you can both get a new one. And there's something almost delightfully mercenary about this mechanic, which encourages you to queue solo, ditch your buddy as soon as they screw up and look like they'll die, and then go make a new buddy with a fellow survivor. It's just a shame that across the dozen games I played, I never even got to see this mechanic happen once. Alpha Hunters matches start as giant chaotic melees as 4 teams all run into each other at once, then kinda dwindle down to a few minutes of aimlessly wandering around looking for the last 3 remaining teams you need to kill. There isn't any of the usual looting to keep you busy, and your recon options are relatively sparse, but these matches are also over in 10 minutes and can see you running into squad after squad of opponents drawn to the sound of gunfire, so there's hardly any time to miss the genre's more methodical trappings. Overall, Alpha Hunters is decent fun. Mostly. When teams get so small, and especially if a one-on-one duel arises, a lot of the character balance starts coming into question. It's a bit early to be crying foul over balance, but the game can still feel a little rock-paper-scissorsy. A melee character will understandably shred a sniper or squishy rifleman to pieces, but good luck trying to kill this robot the size of your reticle who can just fly away, or anyone with multiple dodge rolls as they run in circles around you. It's a good balanced strategy for the larger game modes, and Crucible certainly isn't the first hero shooter to adopt it, but it starts to get a lot shakier as soon as you get into a one-on-one situation, which isn't entirely uncommon in Alpha Hunters. Crucible is also extraordinarily rough. I usually don't mind a hiccup or two, but Crucible was so egregiously buggy that it honestly made Sprint Robot Championship from last week look good. Minimap icons randomly decide not to appear, and sometimes I'll even fire a gun and the game will neither play the sound nor show tracer rounds. I thought my gun had just stopped working entirely here. Perhaps the most hilarious bug I ran into happened in literally the very first game I played, which somehow turned into a 3v5 in a 4v4 mode. And you might be wondering how the hell that could even happen, but as best I can tell, the game failed to find enough players, so it tried to fill an empty slot on my team with an AI. Only to accidentally put the AI on the wrong team. And I don't even know what to say about that. I think that's one of the most mind-meltingly spectacular ways I've ever seen a game break. But outside of the bugs, even some of the finer details that I have to assume are working as intended are still pretty dang wonky. So that's why I can't hit anything in this game. But nitpicking aside, it's time to wrap this up, so let's ask the big question. What do you get out of 5 hours with Crucible? My primary recommendation is to skip Heart of the Hive. Just pretend it doesn't exist. On the rare occasion an actual teamfight happens, it can be decently fun, but this mode does almost nothing but waste your time. Alpha Hunters is a fair sight better, especially if you're a solo player, and with incredibly short and packed rounds, it's actually pretty fun. But after figuring in balance woes, the somewhat lackluster abilities, and the not insignificant bugs, I think almost every other battle royale I've ever played has been more entertaining, and if you're like me and probably only have time for one, almost anything else in the genre is still a more worthwhile choice. To its credit, Crucible shows promise, but that's about all it shows. There is fun to be found here, and the more I played it, the more I started finding characters I enjoyed and started falling into the game's rhythms. But whether you're looking for a battle royale, a hero shooter, or a MOBA, there are vastly more polished and entertaining examples of all 3 already on the market. And if you haven't gone back and played any of them lately, I recommend you do that instead. If you guys didn't already know, I just launched a Patreon, and with your generous support, I could start doing all kinds of cool stuff, like more in-depth video essays and 5-hour streams where I review games like this in real time. So if any of that sounds cool, please consider becoming a patron today. But I hope you enjoyed this first 5 review. Thanks for watching this far, and I'll see you all next week.